Welcome to Patty's Aquatics. Now in today's video, what I plan on doing is I have a few resurrection jars that are ready to go. They've been sitting for over 30 days. And they're ready to add to some aquariums so I can start that food web. Now, if you're not familiar with what a resurrection jar is or what a food web is, I have a bunch of videos you can go over. I'll link a few of them up here. But to start briefly, a resurrection jar is a jar that you take down to a local waterway. Stick your hands to the bottom of that waterway and grab a handful of leaf litter. Stick it in that jar with some of that water. You bring it home and you watch and observe it for 30 days to find and to look at all the little microorganisms that come alive and be able to pick out anything that you may not want in your tank. When you're ready, that's where the food web comes into hand. And what we'll be doing today is I'm going to add those jars to your aquarium. Now, what that does is a few things, but starting that food web is very important. You see, when you put that in there, all those little microorganisms will feed off and break down the waste in your aquarium. They'll break it down so fine, it's easier for the plants to be able to absorb. Now, it doesn't stop there. The fish can feed off of those little microorganisms, and the microorganisms feed off the waste. So like I said, it becomes a web. It's a cycle of life that continues and continues in your tank. So that's why I want to add those in there today. So that being said, let me show you the resurrection jars and we'll start there. So these are the 3 resurrection jars I plan on adding to my aquariums today. Not this 4th one over here. This one, if you go back and look at my fish room update video, this is the one I added to my 129 gallon tank that I got the new Matano rice fish from lrbaquatics.com. Anyway, I put that one in there and it had a little bit of crud left over, so I filled it up with some tank water and I decided just to let it sit. And I have seen a few little cyclops swimming around in there, so I'm just waiting to see if that'll kind of populate in there. So, but these 3 right here, these are the 3 I plan on adding to the aquariums today. Now, I'm not sure how many tanks exactly I'm going to add them to. Like this one here is so jam-packed full, I probably could get 2 tanks out of it. Possibly this one too, but we'll see. But I digress. Let's look at these a little closer. Now, if you see, these things have been up for about 45 days now, well past that 30 day mark, and they are teeming with life. This one has little cyclops copeds everywhere, and I love it. And so does this one. Tap them. You'll see them swim around. Now this jar, this one, if you see all above the water line, has got lots of little worms moving around. Now, this one concerned me a little bit more than the other 2 because I wasn't really sure on what those worms were. And that's where I preached it numerous times in a lot of my videos when it comes to a lot of this food web stuff, is to check out that Father Fish Discord, because that's where I found some answers on this. Now, initially, probably like 2 weeks ago, these worms were up here at the same time as well, but they looked a little different. And at that time, I really truly believed they were some type of larvae of a flying insect, but they kind of disappeared, and I never seen anything flying around in this jar. So I'm assuming that they just died off. I don't think these are the same worm. I could be 100% wrong on that, but they do look a little different. But looking at them closely, they do not look like planaria. So I used the Father Fish Discord again and sent a little video in there and asked for some opinions on what they think they are. Well, it came back with basically they believe these are probably just detritus worm. Now, I learned something new with all this. They sent me a link to an article, and I had no idea that there was thousands upon thousands of different types of worms that live within the substrate, and they're all classified as detritus worm. So that is very interesting to know, and another great thing that I can teach by having you go to that Father Fish Discord, because there is so much information in there, and why they would potentially be up out of the water. Well, there could be, this jar could be very low on dissolved oxygen, so they're coming up out of the water to find air, would be my thinking on that. So with that theory, when I add this to the aquarium, I shouldn't see them anymore. So they should be going down into the substrate because there should be adequate amount of oxygen within my tanks. If they wind up not being detritus worms and I see them all at the top of my water, well, guess what? They become fish food. So that's the case with that. And like I said, the Fatherfish Discord is a great tool for anybody that's into this style of tank. And there's just lots of great information on there. So now that we know what jars we're going to be adding to my aquariums, what aquariums am I going to be adding them to? Well, that is the good question because I want to add it to all of them, but I got to kind of pick and choose right now. There's 3 jars. I could probably use at least 4 tanks worth of leaf litter in those jars. This one I'm going to hold off on. If you've seen my past update video, I'm contemplating redoing it a little bit just because of the amount of algae that's in there and kind of putting more stem plants in there to try to fight that off. And like I said in that video, algae doesn't bother me all that much tremendously. This stuff is really easy to remove, but part of me kind of wants to keep it like it is and just let this algae grow out more, because if you can't tell, all these fish, they burrow down into this algae, and it's great hiding spots, not only for the shrimp, but for when these fish have babies and the fry go down there to be able to hide. So I'm contemplating just kind of leaving it as it is. And since I removed the air and the air stones from all my tanks, the algae, especially up at the top where those air bubbles would always pierce up to break the surface of the water, the algae is really not growing that much up there anymore. So that might have been a big cause of it as well. So I don't know. I think I'm going to wait a little bit for this one just because I want to see what I want to do with it. But now this is the other tank. This is my Matano rice fish tank that I already added the resurrection jar to and started the food web. It's been about 2 weeks since I've had it in here. And as you can see, that leaf litter is broken down pretty good already. I'm going to have to add some leaves to it within the next week or so. So what tanks am I going to add it to? I'd like to add it to my swordtail tank for sure. And probably my hexagon tank for sure. If you've seen, this one has been battling the green water. Now, I only put out 1 video a week, so it probably is going to seem like this green water is going to be with me for months, but in reality, I've been filming a lot of videos in the course of the last 2 weeks, so that's why you're probably seeing green water all the time. But I'm very interested in adding it to this one. So these 2 for sure. I'd like to add it at some point to this one and this one, but I really like to get them in my rainbow shiner tank, and also down here with my white cloud minnows. So let's do that. Let's start with these 2 tanks, the white cloud minnows and the rainbow shiners. And then we'll use the other jar, I think, that has the most amount of waste in it, leaf litter, with all those little tiny worms. We'll put those over here in the swordtail tank, and that tank. We'll break it up between those 2. I think that's the plan we'll do. And then also, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning here, so I just turned the lights on. They typically don't go on until 10 in the morning, so this is a great tip. Typically, you can add these when it's dark so the fish can't eat all the little organisms right away. So what I plan on doing is putting them in here and then turning the lights off right away, so these fish can maybe go back to sleep mode, and then these little critters and organisms within these resurrection jars have a fighting chance to survive. So that being said, let's start adding some resurrection jars to aquariums and starting the food web. So jar number 1. And I'm going to pour much of that stuff in there as possible if it can come out. All right. I need 2 hands. All right, 2 hands. Now it's going to be very cloudy And I'm going to probably have to stick my hand in there to kind of help that get to the bottom a little bit. And then that one will be done. Right, now for the white cloud minnows. Let's see if we can get this in here without having to put the camera down this time. This stuff likes to stick in there. All right, that looks good. And I'll just have to kind of get it off my piece of wood here and let it get down to the bottom. And then it'll find its way. And then for the swordtail tank and my mixed guppy tank, I got this jar that had those little worms. Now note, I just take the cover off of this, and remember how I mentioned that I think there were some larvae initially? There was a bunch of dead little tiny flies stuck to the top of that paper towel. So whatever they were did hatch. So these definitely are something different like I thought. Now, like I said, I'm going to add it to these. I'm going to try to go half and half with this because there is quite a bit of leaf litter within here. Now, another thing I want to point out is that I've seen advice on that Discord as well that you don't have to pour the water of these jars into your aquarium. You can just take that organic material, that leaf litter out, and add it to your tank and keep the water in your jar, because you're still going to have a lot of microorganisms within that jar then, and then you're able to put those dry leaves into that jar to be able to see them, so to speak, when you put them back into your aquarium, to add those dry leaves to it. So that is another option. I prefer to put my entire jar in there to start off with, though, because I want as many of those microorganisms in there as I can. So we can get a closer look now. I spread it out. It's a little cloudy. It's going to be that way till it all settles. I'm going to be turning the lights off here very soon. But I just want to make one other point, that this food web is more than just a food web for breaking down waste and helping your fish and inhabitants in it create a cycle. It's also healthy for your fish. It's one of the many great things about this food web is all those little tiny microorganisms, the ones you can't see. They not only are eating the waste and breaking it down, but there's always a dog-eat-dog world no matter where you are in nature. So anything bad in here, let's say for instance ick. If your fish would get ick, all those little microorganisms could eat and feed off those little tiny parasites within the substrate that fall off and feed on there, and can help cut down any type of diseases in your aquariums. It's the same as in nature. They're always battling and fighting and eating each other, and you don't see outbreaks of ick typically in a body of water. So it's another great beneficial factor of this food web. So that being said, I'm going to turn the lights off, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like later on. And then this is the next day. I let these sit overnight and let the lights come on today, and they're looking great in here. One thing I did notice is that the shrimp really do love these little organic material piles. I've had an explosion of these Blue Dream shrimp in this tank since I removed those endlers out of here. They must have been feasting on them because I barely ever seen them while they were in there. But once I took them out, I've been seeing little ones everywhere, and it's really cool. So yeah, this tank's looking great. Definitely going to have to get some more organic leaves material, more leaves, dry leaves ready and starting to soak for in here, because there is not a lot of material, it didn't look like, from these jars compared to my other tanks. So definitely I'll have to get that ready. But looks great. The start of the food web is just very awesome. Now let's look at the other two tanks. And that's the great things, like I said, about this food webs, is there's so many benefits from it. Not only the food web itself, like I said, with being able to have this material in here for those microorganisms and microfauna to be able to feed on and break down that waste in the aquarium and then in turn having your fish be able to feed off of it. But like I said, it's also healthy for your tanks. It's healthy for your fish. It makes everything a working, healthy ecosystem in here. You know, all those little microorganisms you can't see are always fighting off and eating other things and breaking things down and outcompeting other things. Just some, like I said, some of the great things about having a food web in your aquarium. Like I said, not only food, but health. So these two are looking great as well, like I said. Next, I gotta go get some more resurrection jars so I can get these two tanks yet. And then once I figure out what I'm gonna do with this one. Well, that was my video on adding the food web to the majority of my tanks down here in my fish room. I hope you enjoyed it. I've really been taking a deep dive into this part of the aquarium and this method for a few months now. It's something that's very much intrigued me and something that I think is very, very beneficial to an aquarium, like I stated in this video. Not only for the food web aspect of being able to have that endless cycle of feeding your plants and your fish and those microorganisms, but also for the health of your fish and the health of your tank overall. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, but make sure you hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss any of my upcoming projects. And then as always remember to think outside that box and take a step back into nature. I hope to see you next time here at Patty's Aquatics.